Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Wright from Picasso. Delighted to be here. We are kindly sponsoring this webinar this afternoon by Responsum. And I'm delighted that we've got some fantastic guests for you. We're discussing 10 years of GDPR and has it made a difference? It's going to be a lively chat, very casual. So get your pens ready. As I introduce, there's going to be some great notes and some classic one-liners. So please allow me to next introduce my speakers. So we have the CEO of Responsum, Alex van Korvenberg. He has been on the scene for many, many years and is not only the sponsor here, but has also helped set up and found Responsum and a leading consultancy in Belgium, I believe. The next guest is Terry Evans. Terry is the head of group privacy and UK DPO for Admiral Group. Sorry, in fact, he told me earlier that he's head of digital risk, which is quite an intriguing title. So I'm looking forward to that. And then our final guest for this afternoon is James Finlayson. He is the data protection officer for Virgin Media O2. So 3 fantastic guests. So without further ado, let's bring them onto the stage. Welcome, gentlemen. Great for you to come today.
Hello.
And I've just done a quick introduction, but what I'm going to first start off is, I just wanted to ask the question. This is a big question. The question is, 10 years after GDPR, was it worth it? Has it made a difference? We've got so much. I've delivered privacy programs as a DPO myself, but I just want to hear from you, hear from the horse's mouth. What do you think? I'll start with you, James. 10 years on GDPR.
I think it has certainly made a difference. People have different views as to whether that's positive or otherwise. I'm certainly in the positive camp. I think having the legislation, having the focus on data protection and privacy has invigorated the interest in privacy. It brought some challenges along the way. It's brought us many new requirements and many new discussions on how best to implement things. But overall, I think it is net positive.
No, great. So we've got 1 for positivity. Let's go over to Alex. Let's see what his thoughts are.
Well, it's half and half. I'm really happy that we have the GDPR and what has happened. So I think you really are more and more professional, following up on everything, the governance structures, everything that is documented now. I think there is still room for improvement. And I'm thinking more about, like, is it really built in the organization? Is everybody aware of it? Is everybody really thinking about what is the risk to the people in the end? So I think we can, instead of making it more like, are we ready for the regulator to come by, or are we audit ready? It's more about, are we really changing something in the organization that makes the organization think in a privacy way? And I see a lot of things has moved, so I'm really happy. So I'm definitely also in favor of what Jim was saying, but I think we still have a long way to go to make it in the company invite everybody. That's what I think.
Okay, no, that's good, because you've actually given a little bit of, okay, I'm going to give you a point, but actually there's still room for improvement, which I think is a great point. Terry, what's your thoughts down at Admiral Group?
Very positive. I mean, it's kept me in a job, so that's a plus. Over the last 10 years. I think building on what Alex was saying, in terms of looking at a lens from a customer perspective, it's definitely helped, I think, in terms of like focusing companies' strategies around how they're safeguarding data and like building it into their USPs and focusing on the consumer interest now, because I think people are so much more aware of, as we move to more digital experiences, how their data is being used and choosing their services based on how safe the company is going to handle their data. I think the GDPR was a massive landmark moment for that, and definitely has helped to champion the customer more. So I'm a massive fan of it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so and certainly from my own perspective, I'm sort of in the positive camp as well, and I think your points that you've all made, yeah, it was a surprise. I think from a sort of ethical point, you know, if I think back 10, 12 years ago, when my kids used to ask me what I do for a living, they still do, by the way, but at least now they're all familiar with the acronym GDPR, but really they kind of now see it much more as a you know, an effort to try and control what we're doing with data. So yeah, that's really positive. The next question then really is what, you know, where you see the biggest gap between sort of compliance activities, because there is a danger here that you know, it can become a bit of a tick box exercise. You know, well, coming from ISO 27001 when I was at PwC, you know, I did a lot of auditing, and you could see how it was rapidly going to become potentially a tick box exercise. So what do you think? I'll start with you, Alex, between the compliance activities and the meaningful outcomes for individuals, because we've all touched on, and Terry mentioned about how that's really helped people understand, you know, what we're doing with the data.
I think, and I follow Terry there, because it is more and more people are aware about what the GDPR is. I'm also happy that you're saying your kids understand now more and more what privacy is. Even my son of 14 is thinking like, should I share this data? So it starts getting the awareness. So that's an important thing that we did actually. But when I'm looking at organizations, depending, of course, on the size of the organization, but I see like a lot of organizations are still doing a documentation exercise. They're putting the checkbox still there and making sure that everybody is aware and we have everything ready. But if you, sometimes I think, yeah, it should not be about we did a DPIA. It should be like we changed actually the feature or the data flow in the organization to make sure we have a risk reduction now. And so this is why I see the biggest gap, that we still see it as too much in we documented it really good, but we can still improve it in making the decision making a risk-based led actually, and putting it in the organizational flows, in the product, in the organization, people's mind and everything in it.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, okay. No, thank you. That's a really good point. I like that objectivity. James, what do you think about that? You know, in terms of have you seen that? Is there gaps, you know, between just becoming a compliance or meaningful outcomes?
I don't necessarily see it in the language of gaps. I think, you know, to Alex's point, all companies are on a journey. That may sound trite, but for me, that starts with the basics. You know, checklists are important. You know, having good records are important to show how you demonstrate that you are compliant. It probably feels a little bit long in the tooth now, but I think that journey has started to tilt towards, well, now that I've got that organized and I'm confident in it, how do I translate that into being a little bit more forward thinking? So when we talk about outcomes for customers, I think, well, they want to trust you. You know, they want to feel that they're being treated fairly. You know, they want to have control over their data. That starts with good documentation, but then I think it's how do you map that to, you know, other organizational objectives, and can you tie the two together? So you can show and demonstrate actually this effort in, you know, controlling data, supporting rights, actually genuinely delivers something that people are valuing.
I like that.
It kind of moves you away from the how many kind of subject access requests am I getting and completing to actually, you know, are my customers seeing that as a positive experience, something that reaffirms why I'm with Virgin Media 82 or in Terry's case, Admiral, or for all those people who are watching, you know, your own organization.
Yeah.
You know, how do you link those two?
I like that. That's good. That's good. And Terry, I was about to come to you and you've gone on mute. So
I'm here now.
Yeah, no, it's good. What do you think then? I mean, you know, Admiral Group, I have many of my policies with you. Very good company.
Good to hear. Thank you.
So what do you think is to both James and Alex's points? There's documentation is a key part of that. Having that defensible position, is a key thing, but it shouldn't be the driver and the value, as James was saying, the outcomes of that. But what's your thoughts, Terry?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely that concept of kind of not worth the paper it's written on unless it's kind of lived and breathed throughout the culture of the organization. And we're really trying to, which many of us have done over the years, is try to kind of win the hearts and minds and make sure that everyone's thinking about safeguarding data in their day-to-day roles in a way that it's almost kind of subconscious through kind of continuous monitoring and training and upskilling staff. And we always like to use the analogy, like if you're walking down the stairs, you might walk down the stairs differently if you're holding a hot drink, and you would take steps in order to make sure that you're safeguarding yourself. And if you kind of build that into people's subconscious, then they're always going to be your best line of defense when it comes to actually delivering on the framework, rather than just having it in a policy document somewhere where people are less cognizant of it and it actually doesn't get lived.
I think all three of you have just absolutely said that, and you've taken away my next question because you've answered it already. I want to pick up on the culture point, because the next question is more around operations. So each of us, have teams, in a privacy operations setting. There's a constant pull for time, resource, capability, capacity. So how do we stop them from spending so much time just writing policies or completing maintaining those records and monitoring and reporting, etc. I seem to spend so much time doing, against actually reducing the risk, the material impact to those individuals that we're out to protect. How do we get that balance from a privacy ops perspective? I'll start with you, Alex.
I'm of course I'm selling a tool for people, so I'm not one who is on a daily basis. So I think Terry and James will be better in answering with this. But I can tell you, when I'm talking to customers, that I feel most of the time they're like, we first want to get in control. We want to get control over what we have, because it's the anxiety of if an auditor will come by, that they have at least something to show them. And that's the first thing they want, and that's why they want to buy a tool, of course. And that's what I will hear the first time, like, yeah, but we need a tool because we need to get into control. And then they're not talking about, yeah, but are you also working on the Article 39 where you have to be, as a DPO, giving awareness in the organization? And they're like, oh yes, we have, luckily for us, we have a module on that too, because I think that is as important as just being documenting everything. But I really want to hear what Terry and James are I think, because they're working in a large organization that is, of course, more complex in challenges.
So the pause on our resource time. So let's start with you, Terry. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it kind of comes back down to this concept of risk-based decision making, really, doesn't it? Like you said, Steve, in order to focus your time and effort on the most material risk to customers. I don't think, especially in today's climate, that you can kind of take a gold-plated kind of compliance approach, and arguably is even more of a hindrance to ensuring your compliance efforts, because you want to focus, like you said, all your efforts on the highest risk areas in order to mitigate the most risk and kind of just ensuring kind of a lower level of coverage across all of the estate. So definitely kind of looking at it through a risk-based lens. And like you were saying, around the efforts now required in order to kind of keep up with that paper exercise, especially for those maybe who are in large organizations or growing organizations. Automation is key, I think, in terms of making sure that you kind of design once, deploy many, and try and streamline as much of your kind of administrative tasks possible, so you can spend your time on the most important conversations which require important decisions to ensure that our commitment to privacy and safeguarding our customers' data is still upheld.
Yeah. Thanks, James.
I mean, just picking up on the culture point at the outset and maybe going a little bit deeper on that. certainly that's where I see the best sort of return for my team's time. Spending it with our people. They're both our greatest asset and potentially sometimes our greatest risk. They're the people who are at the forefront using the data. So we have to get out there, understand what's driving them, how they're using data, but also getting them excited about why it's important to protect it. And that's a bit of a challenge. And different people will have different approaches. I sort of think back when I started my career selling Hoovers, actually, on a telephone, sort of on a telesales. We used to have to go up and ring a bell when we made a sale. It was very, very prominent, but that was creating culture. It was creating buzz and excitement. It's probably a daft idea, and now I look back on it and I cringe. I don't use a bell, but you have to go out and make people excited about this stuff. And it goes back to linking it from not just compliance, framing it as something that this is what our customers value. And if you're excited about delivering on, sort of customer experience, this is one way we can do that. And then you harness all of that great people power to be your eyes and ears, but also to be your advocates and make sure things happen in the way that we want, but also are confident if things do go right, they will tell you. So the speed of recovery is fast as well. So getting out and talking with people is key. No,
that's really good. And I certainly to completely endorse that. I think this danger that we can become so fixated with going through the motions and forgetting about the human-centric approach to all of this is critical. And I think the next question was going to be around AI, but I'm actually going to before I do that, I'm just going to sort of interlude because I think that there's a lot to talk about with AI, but at the moment, and I think about my organization where I'm interim DPO, it's all spreadsheets. It's forms in Microsoft. The DPIA process when I arrived was 12 pages long. And we've got it down to 3 pages. But there's lots of privacy management platforms, and we're delighted to have one of our sponsors here today. But I suppose the question is, can we turn all of that information that we're gathering, because I report monthly and then quarterly up to the committees, but can we turn that into useful, real insights? Going back to that original question about, am I changing the culture here? Am I really materially reducing the level of risk that we're facing? And am I ethically and morally doing the right thing by my customers and by, so that question, I'll start with you, Terry. What do you think? That was quite a big question. If you want me to repeat it.
I was just taking some time to digest it, to be honest. But no,
sorry.
From my understanding, especially when it comes to tooling and so on, I think there's definitely a place in terms of what you referred to, Steve, and what you're seeing maybe in terms of for those who are struggling and maybe starting out early in their journey, that the good old spreadsheets is a good place to start. And I think some companies almost get themselves tied in knots sometimes around choosing technology solutions before just doing the basics. But there's so much value, I think, in terms of, as I was referring to before, around automation, setting up kind of systems in a way which enable people to kind of work quickly, having those kind of auto risks that are flagged in more frequent scenarios, and kind of making sure they're not covering old ground, and also ensuring consistency. So I think system-based activities are definitely the way forward, and I'm sure we'll get onto it in a second, but obviously as well with the AI, generative AI use we've seen more recently, there's even more potential for activities to be streamlined and delivered. So I think a good set of tools is a good way to go about it. We also see in large organizations, which I'm sure my colleagues on the panel here today have also seen, where you kind of almost get a bit of the system fatigue, where there's a load of systems where people are brought in to kind of try to cater to many different requirements, all actually really in essence trying to do the same thing. So again, I think it's vitally important that where we never really had it previously in the early days of the GDPR, where again it was very much probably that spreadsheet, start with a spreadsheet to begin with to put your inventory together. Now you've probably got more of a consolidation exercise to think about in terms of digital wastage and overcapacity in systems, and making sure that maybe you try and leverage few toolings, but kind of put a lot more effort into making them streamlined rather than having a multitude of systems which could create disparity and inconsistency.
Yeah. No, that's good. James?
If that was your question, Steve.
Yeah, no, that was actually my question. You did really well to answer.
Have to translate.
Yeah.
It's about tooling, and platforms.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, so you can use them for different purposes. I know that sounds really trite again, but there's the sort of improving your records of compliance almost, and being more efficient. And I think that's where many companies are probably at. So you go from a spreadsheet to a digital platform with a better UX, and it might be a little bit more visible. But have you really changed your way of working? I think that's a bit of a challenge for people. I think what we're trying to get to is, again, use the tools to be more efficient, but then get better access to the data in those tools so you can start to be more proactive. So, so not just recording what you do, but almost trying to anticipate where things are going to crop up. So can you start to look at the trends in either increasing or reducing incidents or subject access requests, or we'll soon have a whole new source of data from the complaints. Hopefully not too many, but again, it's an opportunity to understand how you can improve. That's for me the more interesting part of tooling. How can you use it to look forward to the next quarter, look forward to the next year, and say, again, I've got limited resource, how do I invest it? And if your tool can make you more efficient in the way that you're working by having digital ropers and simpler access to data, then all to the better as well. But the exciting stuff is the sort of future casting. What should I be spending my time on question?
Yep, no, that's really good. I like that. Future casting. I can see a whole webinar on that. Alex, obviously you've got hundreds of clients. You must get loads of feedback on this one. So, please tell us what.
I don't want to make this a commercial talk, of course. But I'm happy that you say, well, people are moving from spreadsheets to a centralized system. I think that's step one. That everything you can find a single location for your ROPAs, DPIAs, vendors, everything is closer together. So you have the latest version always. That's good. By default, I think there are not a lot of tools that will guarantee you the prioritization of the right risks, like saying that this is the insight. It will not give you the insights in incidents that have the same cause or something, or high risk vendors. So this is something that by default will not happen. And honestly, we are now looking into that. Can AI help us with this? But in a really careful way with guardrails. So this is something that's on the planning for the end of the year. I think what we try to do, and that's elaborating on what James was saying, to create this culture, we have put as one of the cornerstones at Responsum collaboration, how to collaborate with the people in the organization. Because, of course, it's not a privacy department that has to do everything. You want to ask your people, please do something. And I remember, I come from the consulting company, so I do know what they were doing in the time. They were sending Excels, and these Excel need to be filled in. And then I saw these labels there, like retention period, data subject, category of data, legal basis. And then we expect that the business will understand it. And so this is something we took in Responsum and said, like, okay, we're going to make a collaboration portal. And actually, we can change the labels of all these fields. Like the data subject, it will not say data subject. It will say, like, whose personal data are you trying to get? And how long do you keep the data instead of what is the retention period? So we try to make it more in business language, But I feel that it's getting more the culture in there, and this is feedback that we get from customers that, okay, our business is now understanding what we need, and they don't see this like, oh my God, privacy department is again asking these difficult questions, and this is okay. Whenever I'm ready with my work, I can start looking into it, and I will not love to do this. So the collaboration aspect is, if you talk about the culture, I think this can really help there.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thank you. No,
Can I just jump on that one, Steve, actually, because I think Alex has made a great point there, which is something we often forget. If it's the privacy practitioners choosing the tool, you hope that it will do the right things for our objectives. But if you're putting that tool into your front line, the people that are telling you, they have to understand how to use it.
Yeah.
And if your conversation has moved to how do I use the tool, what does that question mean? You're in trouble. So don't forget that kind of human element of giving people tools that they can use with ease. So I think it's a great point. Sometimes overlooked.
No, I agree, and thank you. So I'm going to sort of now, mention the elephant in the room called AI. Every webinar has to have a conversation about it. But we are seeing the increase in scale, speed, complexity of the data sets, that the LLMs get trained on, right? We know the principles of garbage in, garbage out. We're familiar with all of that good data governance of quality. So what I'm interested to know from the panel today is, are the teams ready for this? Are our teams, our privacy operations teams, ready for this next evolution? That, it's not, we're talking potentially different fundamental business models, operating models that we've not envisaged yet, maybe. I don't know. Let's start with you, Terry. What's your thoughts?
I think I haven't heard from anyone who probably can say they are ready, as like you said, because it's still maturing and we're still assessing what the impact will be. But I'd say we're getting ready. I don't think we're in a position where we are completely starting from scratch. And I think that's what's so brilliant about talking about 10 years of the GDPR, because a lot of this stuff kind of comes back down to the basic principles of GDPR in terms of accountability, transparency, and like you mentioned, Steve, at the beginning of the call, probably since just as you asked me to join this panel, we've had a role change in my role, in the sense that we're looking after now data protection, privacy, as well as data governance, AI governance, and kind of tech and infosec from a line 2 perspective, which in the financial services sector is kind of more of a sense checking team over the top of the line 1 team, so kind of doing the doing within the actual business entities. And the AI governance element of it is stretching across all of those areas, which is why it's quite good to bring it all together under one umbrella, really. So we can really look at what the synergies are in terms of what's already out there, going back to tooling and the repositories that we were just discussing, and all the good stuff that we put in place with GDPR. Are they good building blocks in order to allow us to accelerate with the use of AI? Absolutely. And I think I'm encouraging the business, and when I have conversations with other businesses too, is it's not reinventing the wheel so much, and that kind of old terminology of a evolution rather than a revolution. But we definitely have a lot of work to do in terms of volumes control. So when it comes in, and I think that's the main thing with AI, it seems to be a tool, like another tool in a toolkit, like you had obviously with Office desktop applications and moving to cloud and quantum computing and so on. But with AI, it definitely amplifies those existing risks and it moves it at pace. And, we've all heard some of the horror stories where sometimes you put an AI tool in place and it will start scraping things that you didn't realize weren't secured, and it starts pulling back data from repositories that probably is quite sensitive, and you should have put some more access controls in place on it. And those are the sort of things I think that AI are helping to expose risk-wise. So how do we get on top of the volumes? And like you said, the complexity and the explainability as well for our customers, because it's hard for even some of the most advanced professionals to understand what goes into an LLM, as you were referring to, and moving towards agentic AI, it gets even harder. So how can we build off our current transparency toolings, via the kind of privacy notice, and again, stuff that the GDPR brought in 10 years ago, and kind of build on that to kind of make it easy for customers to understand what we're doing with the use of AI, but not overwhelming them with loads of complex information, and kind of timing that information right so they get it in the moment, rather than, again, kind of this old process of putting it all within a document just to kind of satisfy some of the compliance regulations.
Yep.
So we're getting there. I think we're on the journey, and we're definitely moving towards AI readiness. So that's where we are.
Thanks, Terry. That's a very good insight, because I think we are on a journey now. James, what's your privacy ops? Have you made changes, or are you making changes, or is it all set up now?
So we have adjusted our model. I wouldn't say it's the final model. It's going to be iterative as we learn. And I think that's sort of similar to what Terry is saying. But I think what I've sort of seen with AI is that it's been a healthy stress test on a range of frameworks across the business. You've got the privacy, you've got the security, you've got various different data governance models. And the one thing I've learned is, AI is not just about one of those disciplines. It sits across all of them. So as a consequence of our sort of stress testing, we've started to look at how can we bring those issues closer together. Each discipline has its own focus, and that continues. But how can we look at the impact of AI across all of those sort of I say disciplines, so that we can take a more holistic view of it? And I think that does two things. It helps the business make better decisions faster, because you get it all in one place. But I also think you just get sort of better output from that, because you have a mix of experts feeding off of one another, when in the old model they may have been in silos. So you not only get faster decision making by pulling the sort of governance models together, but I also think you get better decisions through that collaboration. The one thing that I think we've still yet to crack is, how do you AI is putting a lot of emphasis on speed. If you want to do things fast, because the technology itself speeds things up. And that's a bit of a challenge, because in some of the old models you go through layers before you get to people. And actually we're trying to think of how can we safely push some of that closer to the data scientists, so there's not the backwards and forwards of heavy governance, but it's more proportionate, and they can make decisions with guardrails and sort of filter it that way. So it's that sort of risk versus speed kind of issue, and that's where I think we've still got a bit of work to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because of I think we're watching an evolution, aren't we? We're living through that. I think Terry mentioned about the cloud, and prior to that, I mean, I don't want to show my age here, but I remember migrating from an AS400 system to Windows 95. But I do think the speed is the bit that's going to potentially catch us out. So Alex, I was thinking about where AI. So on my 3-year roadmap, because I don't believe you can go any further than 3 years at its current rate, I put about migrating or implementing AI-enabled ROPers, DPIAs, DSARs. So I just wanted to ask, as a major sort of system platform provider, is that something that your customers are asking you to do as well, to actually because you can see how that AI can really help in that,
Yeah.
especially in that monitoring and those trends and that preventative point that James mentioned earlier. Are you seeing a demand for that?
Definitely, Steve. But actually there is, we always see there a hard dilemma with these privacy officers or the privacy professionals. We see like they get a push from the C-level. Are you using AI? Because apparently everybody needs to start using AI in organizations. So they come to us like, do you guys have AI in the tool ready? Yes or no? Because we have to. But on the other hand, they're also saying like, is it safe? Is this actually a good idea to do? So they're like, they know what the risk, they feel what the risk is. And this is something we see. And I think, well, with what we made, AI can definitely help you in doing a lot of administration work. It can be your well-read analyst who can propose a lot of things to you, who can automate your administration. But of course, there is a lot of things that you should be cautious about. Don't automate any legal conclusions or risk acceptance decisions. All these things should be done by a human being. So that's something that, well, smaller organization, and I'm not talking really smaller, they sometimes think like, okay, AI will solve everything for me, and that's not true. You will always need a human being to make the final decision. And that's what I see. Like, but to answer the question, like, do we receive questions about it? Oh yes, a lot. And I think this is because if you take a look at the daily work of somebody in privacy, a lot of things are just administrations and following up on tasks, following up on things to be done. And if you can really get those out of the system, like vendors assessments, if you do pre-screening of the vendor assessment, if you can say like there are inconsistencies already coming out of it, it will help you. I've other things, DSARs, you can do a triage, you can do a classification there, you can do pattern recognition, you can do a lot of things with AI. But yeah, that's what AI should be used for. But then it should be a human being with a lot of brains and knowledge on the GDPR, looking at it and saying, okay, this is what you do with it.
Yeah, and that, I think this is, so I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but I certainly, we've been doing a lot of sort of amended DPIAs on the use of AI across different systems, especially around customer services data, claims handling and that sort of thing. There's a big push for us to sort of go down the automated decision making route, at least for 80% of that claims handling. But we're a long way off from that. So I suppose it might just be worth just talking about what your thoughts are about AI being used in those kind of situations, because the danger there, I think you just alluded to, Alex, is that you don't get proportionality. You don't necessarily get that human oversight to check and validate that there's some sort of ethical impact here. So I'm just curious from Terry and James about what they've implemented at their places.
Yeah, I think another risk, which maybe we could touch upon, is kind of how AI is driving autonomy and independence within your staff and your employee base. Because like Alex was saying, all these third-party vendors have turned on this AI functionality now, and it seems to be if you haven't done it already, then worried that their share price is going to be affected. And then that again is giving capabilities to staff members to do the things that Alex was saying that maybe they shouldn't be doing, which is relying on it for final decisions and using it as a final communication method to customers and so on and so forth, which obviously we'd rather the right oversight on. It's great tooling in order to help us do the first pass, but you almost need to be a manager of the AI itself, and then obviously that allows more time to be freed up for other activities. So the way that we've tried to manage it so far is that we've created a bit of a triage or a front door, where if it's kind of like a low risk activity, then as long as you're attesting to certain requirements and the data is not very sensitive and so on and so forth, and maybe it's a summarization tool for some work activities, kind of crack on scenario in order to help with the managing the volumes, but then obviously the scale increases slightly then as you start to move towards more special category datas, kind of tooling that kind of has a real kind of significant legal effect on data subjects and so on. So then that kind of goes through a bit more of a rigorous review. But yeah, the capabilities now are just insane. I think someone can basically create a website on a few prompts, asking someone to insert their payment details for different services, and the expertise just isn't in the AI to be able to secure it enough. Like, you don't know if actually is the information that it's been put in it being protected? Is it in a secure bucket, or is it in an open bucket? And is it able to be discovered online? Can it be web crawled, and so on and so forth? Which in a lot of cases it can. So it's just insane how quickly these risks can now present themselves. So I think that the volume, the speed that James was saying, and the autonomy seems to be the main things that we're trying to combat against.
James?
I mean, we're very fortunate to have a very strong sort of data science team who, do have the skills and the experience to look deep into these models and understand them. But I think that's the sort of very intentional AI that people will scrutinize. I think there is always that risk of the other AI, whether you call it shadow or the sort of the sort of lower sort of visible AI that pops up. Again, we are, we use many tools, part of the traditional toolkit. I guess, from a security standpoint, making sure we understand what's been installed on our systems so we can monitor and control them. We can block activity if required to protect data. So we work hard to create the protective shell around our systems and our data, so you can give people a safe environment in which they can use those tools. And then again, we work hard to train our people on safe use of AI in the workplace. It does largely come down to individual sort of accountability, but informed, so they sort of know how to use something and when not to. So sorry to repeat that sort of message, but I think it's one of those things about agency is both about sort of having the ability to do something, but it's also the responsibility to know that you do those things safely. And I think that's our best approach to trying to reduce that risk. And there are approved focused tools that we provide teams with to perform certain tasks. So we try and create that sort of safety in that way.
That's
and just to I was going to build on that, Steve, as well. But interestingly, it's kind of thinking about, just because we can doesn't mean we should with all this AI functionality. And I think, like you said, the boardrooms are very interested to make sure that people are not being left behind and we're using AI. But I think if you're more thoughtful around where we should use it to get the most impact, and agents seem to be a big thing at the moment, where the ability to build an agent just throughout anyone in the workforce is so easy now. But really trying to build a mindset that treating an agent is almost like kind of human resource in its own right, really. You probably should make sure you've got a proper job specification, you've got clear line management over how it's going to be managed, and then continuous monitoring to make sure that there's performance and feedback. So I'm not sure if you can put an agent on a performance improvement plan, but I think we're trying to use some terminology which people already got in the business sense. So it's kind of taking a bit more of a step back and allowing people to kind of pause before they start deploying, and the capabilities are there and people are ready to use it. But I think that maturing of thinking around actually how can I manage this technology or this agent better, and applying those basic principles has really helped.
Really good. Thank you so much. I think we're running out of time, as always, because these conversations are so enjoyable. We could probably spend the afternoon here, but I've got one sort of semi question, and then my final question is going to be around sort of 10 years on, and then 10 years into the future. But before we get to there, I'd love to know what are your boards or your regulators, if you're working in one of the ICO's sandbox, what are they, what's being asked? What are they asking you about our current risk position? Are they asking? Maybe you shouldn't answer that bit, but what kind of privacy risks do you think you would be escalating, I suppose? And we've sort of touched on a lot of them today, but I'm just curious to know. And Alex, I'll start with you, because obviously the great thing about having a tool and a platform and consulting background is you talk to a lot of people, right? So you get to hear from multiple different customers. What are the risks that they're being asked to produce information on? I'm curious.
Honestly, Steve, a lot of customers are not talking to me about their risks and what is going wrong, and that's an insight I'm getting, and I think this is obvious for reasons. But I think it's a difference in are they. But this is what I think that it should be. It should be an organization should answer the question like, is your privacy program risk-led? That you're putting the risks. What are the risks and what are you doing actually? Mm-hmm. Instead of artifact-led, that you got all the evidences right, you got everything. And this is what I don't know, but actually I think this question is better for Terry and James, because they are working in organizations. I've never talked to an authority, so so that's why
I never want to.
I want to keep it like this. I want to keep it like this. So
no one wants to talk to the regulator, because it's usually the worst fear,
unless you're well prepared, of course. But that's,
Yes, exactly right. So, James, go on. What's your thoughts about the sort of risks that you're being asked to, highlight or present on?
I'd almost flip it and say, I think the focus is around what are the opportunities, and that's where most of the conversations are starting. But it's all framed within that sort of way of looking at a responsible approach to AI. How do we put our customers first? Trying to align these opportunities to our broader business objectives, which is about doing the right things by our customers and doing the right things by our people. So it's what are the opportunities to help us improve that, because that maps you directly into your sort of strategic aims. We want to be trusted by our customers, so it has to start there. And then we work back and we say, okay, how can AI help us achieve that, if it can? If it can't, we do it a different way. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of informed from that perspective. But in terms of the risks, it's a lot of the conversations I'm having is more around how AI sort of almost amplifying existing risks. I mean, there are some new ones, of course, but it's around amplifying existing risks and asking whether the control environment we have in place at the moment is, sort of suitable. And saying if you don't have the resources, what do you need to make sure that we can create that safe environment? But always tying it back to what's the responsible thing to do, and sort of working from that point.
Yeah, what's the opportunity? I like that. That's great. Terry, what's your thoughts on that?
From a regulatory perspective, I think that my experience so far with the regulators have been that they're in a learning journey too. So I think actually some of those conversations where they've reached out and asked to speak to specialists and so on has been really positive. And I think especially the way that the UK has kind of taken the approach so far, which is trying to build on sector-specific regulation and amplifying that, rather than somewhere like the EU have taken a bit more of a stringent approach with kind of more standard legislation. So that's I think that's really helped in terms of our relationship with the regulator, and then obviously the regulator understanding the hot topics, so to speak. The boardroom itself, I don't think there's a board that goes without obviously talk of AI. Always, as you mentioned, Steve, at the beginning of the call, it's a kind of standard agenda item now. I think the AI risks as well, they're very heavily concerned about, which I'm sure many other boards are, because obviously the shareholders and the customers, I think, are also quite cognizant of the impacts and making sure that companies are doing the right thing going forward. And the thing that they are most concerned around, as James was saying, in terms of like the amplifying the risks, are we kind of making sure that if the volume's increasing and those risks are amplifying, are we on top of it, and is a suitable control framework in place? But also the continuous monitoring, I think, the kind of, how do we not only manage the volumes, but the continuous oversight and making sure that we're not seeing these kind of drifts within the models, and the models are behaving the way they are when we first deployed them, and making sure they're not susceptible to attacks over time and degrading, and that's kind of a big focus of our area too, is rather than kind of like a big assessment at the beginning and then kind of making sure we've got the right controls in place, just letting it go live where there's any material changes. With some of the LLMs, they're continuously changing throughout the life cycle of their deployment, so how do you make sure you keep on top of that? So that's areas that we're putting a lot of effort into at the moment to make sure that we've got enough comfort around that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, gents. So I'm gonna wrap up now. I've got a sort of closing question to all of you, which is kind of like we've started this conversation by reflecting on 10 years. The consensus was that it's changed culture, mindsets. It's evident in young people, Alex's, my sons, that are now sort of thinking about their privacy settings and actually know what we do for a living, for a change. So, and we've covered quite a bit of ground today, which has been really, really insightful. And I'm very grateful to you both. We've talked a lot about collaboration. We've talked about it being innovative and value-led, risk-based, obviously, and I really like the fact that what it comes back to is spending a lot of time with people to get them to think differently. And your analogy, Terry, of going down the stairs holding a cup of tea was perfectly spot on. So I'm kind of really excited as well for what the next 10 years are going to hold for us. I'm also intrigued, Terry, by your change or your sort of adoption of a broader set, data governance, you mentioned, digital risk, that kind of thing, which I can see evident across all of the DPOs that I have the pleasure of knowing. So that's definitely an evolution of the DPO we're seeing right now. But my question really is about looking ahead. What would you be saying to yourself from 10 years ago? We've got GDPR coming round the corner. If you could put your arms around yourself of 10 years ago and go, right, okay, look, I can guarantee focus on this, and this. What would you, with your crystal ball, say, what does the next 10 years look like? If you're going to spend time on anything, I don't know, start building a large language model, or I don't know. You tell me. So who wants to start with this final question, and then we've got to wrap up.
Yeah, I'll go 50. That was a lovely summary. You're definitely keeping AI out of a job with that summary there. I think that's good to hear. Yes, the 10 years from now, I think 10 years ago, there was a lot of focus on obviously making sure that we're maintaining compliance with the GDPR. And I think that was very kind of looking at it for a personal data lens. And we was in this kind of, whether or not we kind of pre-industrial revolution before obviously AI is coming along, but kind of like this kind of structured, unstructured data, a lot of manual handling of kind of documentation, which is now obviously very, very much more digital 10 years on. And I think 10 years time, it's just even going to be even more digital. And it's kind of, that's why we've kind of created this very kind of specific kind of hit team of different capabilities around data governance, AI governance, tech and infosec, and data protection and privacy. Because it's also intersectional now. And I think a lot of the time, especially 10 years ago, I was so focused on kind of privacy compliance in a silo almost, whereas now it's kind of integral to make sure, and what James referred to earlier, that you've got kind of a cross-disciplined team in order to enable you to respond to those emerging risks. It's got to be really hard, as you mentioned, to even try and do a 3-year plan with the rate of change that we're seeing from technology at the moment. So I think the only kind of bedrock, which is unlikely to change, is the kind of consolidation exercise when it comes across the risk frameworks. And we're seeing so much of the regulators and the legislators trying to keep up with oversight and control that you probably need a quite flexible framework, which kind of again drives that more principle base that I discussed at the beginning around having those kind of transparency, accountability, kind of documentation foundations, that whenever new regulation does emerge, you can quite easily just slot it into the main frameworks and do minor tweaks if needed, because it all seems to be trying to achieve the same thing, which is just acting in the best interest of the consumer, really. So yes, I think more consolidation when it comes to risk management. And of course, I think if you started to think about AI tooling and try to automate some of your peer assessments or your risk assessments, I think you're going to be hopefully in a good position in 10 years' time.
That's great. Thank you. No, it's very insightful. Alex?
Yeah, I follow Terry completely, actually. I want to start with the last point, like use AI where you can in a good way. So AI augmented operations, that they do routine task drafting and these things. I would say, like, stop treating register as the end goal. So it's not anymore about documenting all the things. It's like, because this is what people now are saying, we documented it, so we gathered evidence on everything. No, it should be more risk-led and evidence-based. Make sure that everything is there. And I think the biggest challenge will be and definitely thanks to the AI, it's not going to be a project by project approval queue. Like this is how I see a lot of privacy projects going on. Like we have a project coming in, you come in, you do your DPIA, it's approved, check in. But with AI, it's going to be a continuous assurance that you need to give. It's going to be a continuous flow. And so you need to move the privacy into the product. I already talked about is a product in the data flow. So make sure that the privacy is in your product, in your organization, actually, and that you don't have to put it like, okay, the project is coming on, and then you have to start validating it, because you will be too slow probably in the end.
That's really great tip. Thank you, Alex. James, you have the pleasure of final comments.
Yeah, it's a great comment. So I'll just be really brief. I think AI is likely to, well, not likely, it will automate a lot of what we do today. And I think that's a good thing. So we can move away from measuring what we're doing to probably what impacts we're having. And I think that will be transformational. And I think that's where we depart from GDPR and we move into the next phase. With AI, we have to look at how the models continue to operate. It's baked in, that continuous monitoring, and that creates that opportunity to really look at those impacts. I don't have the answers as to how we will do that yet, but it shifts. It shifts from what we're doing to how we're impacting, and I think that's probably the right focus.
No, that's great. Absolutely brilliant. Gentlemen, sadly we've run out of time. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for your pragmatism and your analogies and well, just being here to make this a really great, impactful webinar. Thank you very much to Responsum for sponsoring this. On behalf of Picasso, as you know, we're a not-for-profit community of 8,000 of us. So get involved, become a member, submit your articles, come on the webinars, podcasts, etc., or come to our events. We are always looking for volunteers. James knows, because I often have to ask him to do something. We're growing and we would love to grow with you. So we're seeing a big change in the evolution, which we touched on during this webinar, and we want to be part of that journey with you. So please get involved. I'm Steve Wright. I want to thank Responsum and Alex for sponsoring today. There are more webinars coming downstream, more podcasts. So stay tuned, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. And thank you once again to the esteemed guests this afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you both.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye.